The chandeliers burned bright above me, but all I could feel was the weight of eyes. It was my first time back in the same circle since Daniel shattered me, and of course he was here, standing at the center of the gala like the world bent to him. The man who had once called me his, who discarded me when I was no longer useful. He looked exactly the same, handsome in his suit, smug in his triumph, flanked by people who had always fed off his arrogance. And then his eyes found mine. His smirk widened, cruel and deliberate. "Iris," he drawled, raising his glass so the entire room followed his gaze. "Back already? Brave, considering everyone here remembers how desperately you begged me not to leave." The crowd gasped, whispers striking like whips. My chest burned, my throat tightening, but before I could break, another voice cut through, smooth, sharp, and lethal. "Careful, Daniel," Ethan said, stepping out from the crowd. He was Daniel's rival, the one man he never beat, tall and unreadable in his black suit. His gaze sliced through Daniel like steel. "You talk so loudly when the only thing worth noticing is how badly you're sweating." Laughter erupted, knives in disguise. Daniel's jaw clenched, fury flashing across his face. Ethan didn't give him a chance to strike back. He moved to my side, his hand pressing firmly to the small of my back, guiding me forward with quiet dominance. He leaned in close, his voice pitched low for only me. "Don't flinch," he murmured, every word a command. "You're with me now." The words hit harder than they should have, sharp and commanding, and for one wild second I almost believed them. The ballroom around us buzzed like a hive, whispers rising, eyes following every move as he guided me forward. My pulse roared in my ears, each step both a performance and a trap. Daniel's glare burned into me from across the room, his smile long gone, his pride crumbling in front of the people he lived to impress. I could see it, the way his jaw tightened, the way his glass tilted too far in his grip, the way he looked like he wanted to drag me back just to prove he still could. And that was when I realized exactly what Ethan was doing. This wasn't about me. This was about Daniel. I was the weapon he'd chosen, the perfect blade to twist into his rival's side. I should have pulled away, told him I wasn't part of his games. But Ethan's hand was firm, his presence too controlled, his eyes daring me to ruin the show. If I broke, if I faltered, Daniel would win. So I didn't. I let Ethan lead me to the champagne table, let him pluck a glass and press it into my hand with a smoothness that looked rehearsed. He clinked his glass against mine, his mouth curving in a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Smile," he murmured, his voice so low no one else could hear. "He's watching." Against my better judgment, I obeyed, tilting my lips into something elegant, sharp enough to cut. The whispers swelled around us like music, and from the corner of my eye I saw Daniel's fury tighten into something dangerous. He moved, breaking away from his circle, crossing the ballroom with long strides that made the air shift. Ethan didn't react. He kept sipping his champagne, his hand never leaving my waist. But when Daniel stopped in front of us, his voice was loud enough to slice through the music. "Really, Iris?" he sneered, his eyes sweeping over me like I was still his to own. "Is this what you've been reduced to? Parading yourself on Ethan's arm so you can crawl back into relevance?" Gasps scattered, heads turned, the room savoring every word. My chest clenched, shame threatening to strangle me, but before I could speak, Ethan's laugh cut through. It wasn't loud, but it carried, silken and lethal. "Relevance?" he echoed, tilting his head with a smirk that was pure provocation. That's a bold word coming from a man who hasn't been relevant since the day Iris walked out of his life. Daniel's face twisted, his fury naked now, but Ethan wasn't finished. He set his glass down, stepped closer, his arm tightening around my waist in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. "Let me make this clear," Ethan said, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "If you ever speak to her like that again, it won't be your pride you lose in front of this room. It'll be your teeth." The silence was electric, the crowd frozen, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. Daniel's fists curled, his chest heaving, but he didn't move. He couldn't. Not with every set of eyes watching, waiting for him to explode. I stared up at Ethan, my breath caught in my throat, because he wasn't acting anymore. This wasn't just strategy. The heat in his eyes, the sharpness in his voice, it wasn't for the crowd. It was for me. And for one dangerous heartbeat, I wondered if I was the only one in the room who noticed. Daniel spat a curse under his breath and stormed out, his pride shredded, his audience left whispering in disbelief. The ballroom erupted in chatter, laughter, speculation. I stood frozen, Ethan's hand still firm at my waist, his body still too close, his scent still curling into me like smoke. Slowly, deliberately, he released me, turning back to the table to finish his champagne as though nothing had happened. My heart pounded, my skin buzzing where his touch had been. What was that? I hissed, my voice low, sharp, desperate. He glanced at me, calm as ever, his mouth curving into that infuriating half-smile. That, he said, setting his glass down with quiet precision, was the start of Daniel's downfall. And you're going to help me finish it. I stared at him, my pulse still erratic, the taste of humiliation and adrenaline sharp on my tongue. Excuse me? The laughter and chatter of the gala roared in the background, but Ethan's focus was a blade locked on me. He leaned casually against the table, every inch of him composed, as though he hadn't just threatened to knock Daniel's teeth out in front of half the city's elite. You heard me, he said smoothly. Daniel's downfall. You want it just as much as I do. Probably more. His words cut, and not because they were wrong. He said them like a simple fact, one he'd known long before I admitted it to myself. I don't need your help, I bit out, adjusting the strap of my dress just to keep my hands from trembling. No, he replied, his tone as calm as ice. But you want it. And I'm offering you a way to make it sting. His eyes gleamed with something unreadable, part amusement, part challenge. Daniel only understands power, Iris. Public power. You want him to feel what you felt? We make him watch. My stomach nodded, heat coiling low in my chest. Watch what? He smiled faintly, tilting his head as though it was obvious. Us. Together. He won't care if you're successful, if you move on quietly. But if you stand next to me? If you smile at me the way you used to smile at him? He'll choke on it. The way he said it, clinical, detached, but with the faintest curl of taunt in his voice, made my skin prickle. He wasn't suggesting affection. He was suggesting war. So what, I said, forcing a bitter laugh, you want me to play your girlfriend? He studied me for a long moment, his silence almost heavier than his words, then leaned closer until the crowd around us blurred. Not my girlfriend, he murmured, low enough only I could hear. My weapon. My throat went dry, and for one dizzying second I wondered if he could feel how fast my heart was beating. And what's in it for you? I whispered. His eyes flicked down, briefly, then back to mine. I get to watch him unravel. Piece by piece. His voice sharpened, threaded with something darker. And I think you'll enjoy watching just as much as I will. My lips parted, but no words came. He straightened, already smoothing his suit jacket, already back in control. I'll call you tomorrow, he said, like it was decided, like I'd already agreed. And then, without waiting for permission, Ethan offered me his arm. Every eye in the room followed as I slid my hand into the crook of his elbow, the choice made for me before I realized I'd made it. Daniel was gone, but the whispers were alive, the spectacle burning into memory. And I couldn't deny it, Ethan was right. I wanted this. I wanted Daniel to suffer. But as Ethan led me through the crowd, his hand brushing mine, his warmth coiling against my skin, one thought gnawed at me. Was I teaming up with Daniel's rival for revenge, or was I walking straight into another kind of fire? The first public appearance wasn't supposed to mean anything. That's what I told myself as I zipped up the midnight blue gown and stared at my reflection, willing my hands to steady. Ethan had texted me the details with no pleasantries, no questions, just a time, a place, and a note, don't be late. He'll be there. He didn't need to say Daniel's name. I already knew. The gala was bigger than the last, a press-heavy event where every step you took was documented and dissected. Which, of course, made it the perfect stage. I arrived alone, my stomach in knots, my heels echoing too loudly across the marble. Eyes tracked me instantly, whispers curling like smoke. That's her. Daniel's ex. The one on Ethan's arm now? Except Ethan wasn't here yet. I stood in the center of the ballroom, exposed, seconds away from bolting, when the crowd shifted. He entered like the room belonged to him. Black suit tailored to perfection, expression cool and unreadable. Ethan didn't look at anyone, didn't stop to shake hands or play the game. He walked straight to me, every step measured, and without hesitation, slid his hand around my waist. Smile, he murmured against my ear, his voice as sharp as the grip on my hip. He's watching. I lifted my head, forcing my lips into the faintest curve, even as my pulse stumbled. And sure enough, across the room, Daniel stood frozen, his date clutching his arm while his eyes burned into me. The photographer swarmed instantly. Flashes burst like fireworks, capturing Ethan's hand on me, the way I leaned slightly into his chest, the calculated ease of two people who belonged together. You're enjoying this, Ethan said quietly as he led me further in, his mouth close enough that the words brushed my skin. Aren't you? No, I hissed, though my heart betrayed me, racing as Daniel's expression darkened. Yes, he corrected softly, his fingers tightening at my waist. You want him to see you untouchable. And right now, you are. We mingled, we posed, we played the roles with unnerving precision. Ethan was flawless, offering me drinks, brushing his hand against mine just long enough for the cameras to catch, even leaning close as though whispering something wicked. Every move was calculated, every smile designed to twist the knife in Daniel's pride. But the longer it went on, the more it didn't feel like acting. My skin tingled where Ethan touched me, my laugh came too easily when he made a dry remark, and the way his gaze lingered a fraction too long made my throat tighten. The act was meant for Daniel, for the audience. Yet it was pulling me under, moment by moment. The night culminated when Daniel finally broke. He cornered me as I slipped away from the crowd, his hand seizing my wrist. His smile was venomous, his voice pitched for me alone. You think Ethan cares about you? You're just a pawn in his game. He'll discard you the second you're no longer useful. Before I could reply, before my anger could find words, Ethan was there. His hand clamped over Daniel's wrist, his expression carved from ice. Let her go, he said. Daniel sneered. Or what? The crowd wasn't watching now, this wasn't for them. This was personal. Ethan's grip tightened, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Or I'll remind you exactly why you've never beaten me. Daniel's jaw flexed, his pride warring with the danger in Ethan's stare. Finally, he released me, his eyes narrowing before he stalked off into the shadows. I exhaled, my hand shaking, but Ethan didn't let go. His touch lingered, his eyes locked on mine with a heat that made my breath falter. For a moment, it wasn't about Daniel at all. For a moment, it was just us, standing too close, the line between pact and something else burning thinner by the second. The ride back to his penthouse was suffocating. Neither of us spoke, but the silence was anything but empty. My pulse still hadn't steadied from the way Daniel had gripped my wrist, from the way Ethan had intervened with lethal calm. I stared out the window, city lights streaking by in blurred lines, while Ethan sat beside me like a storm in a tailored suit, his jaw clenched, his hands flexing against his knees. When the car pulled up to his building, he didn't wait for me to follow. He strode ahead, holding the door open with the kind of precision that made it feel more like a command than courtesy. I stepped inside, my heels clicking against marble, my voice finally breaking the tension. You didn't have to do that. He shut the door behind him with a quiet thud. Do what? Step in like that. You made it worse. His eyes flicked to mine, sharp and unreadable. Worse? He had his hands on you, Iris. Tell me, what exactly was I supposed to do, stand by and watch? The way he said it made my breath catch, heat curling in my chest. I crossed my arms, forcing my voice steady. You made a scene. That's not part of the deal. Ethan stepped closer, slow and deliberate, until the air felt charged. The deal is to destroy him. That means showing him he can't touch you anymore. Not without consequences. His words were cold, but his eyes burned, and I couldn't look away. You're enjoying this, I accused, my voice sharper than I meant. Parading me around. Using me like one of your weapons. He tilted his head, his lips curving faintly, almost mocking. Of course I am. You agreed to it. No, I shot back. I agreed to the pact. Not, whatever that was tonight. His smile faded, replaced by something harder. And what do you think that was? My throat went dry. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, because the truth was tangled somewhere between anger and the memory of his hand at my waist. Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his hair, pacing a step away before turning back to me. Look, he said, his voice lower now, stripped of its usual arrogance. This is how Daniel works. He feeds on weakness, on shame. If you want to ruin him, if you want to take back what he stole from you, then you don't get to be invisible. You stand beside me. You let him see he lost. That's the game. The logic was flawless, clinical, but there was something else in his tone, a faint edge, a crack in the armor. I frowned, stepping toward him despite myself. And what about you? I asked softly. Why does it matter so much to you? His jaw tightened, his gaze flicking away just long enough to betray him. When his eyes returned to mine, they were unreadable again, the mask firmly back in place. Because Daniel needs to lose, he said simply. And you're the only one who can make sure it hurts. The words should have been cold, but the way he said you made my pulse stumble. For a long moment, the silence stretched, heavy with everything unspoken. Then he straightened his cuffs, the sharp lines of control snapping back into place. Be ready, he said flatly. Tomorrow, we raise the stakes. He turned away, leaving me standing in the center of his immaculate penthouse, my chest tight, my thoughts spinning. I had agreed to a pact. To strategy. To revenge. But the way Ethan looked at me tonight, the way his voice had cracked for just a heartbeat, it didn't feel like strategy anymore. And that terrified me more than Daniel ever could. The next move wasn't mine. Ethan orchestrated it, as if he had been planning 2 steps ahead the entire time. A charity auction, exclusive, crowded with Daniel's allies, crawling with cameras. The kind of place where reputations were built and shredded in a single evening. I told myself it was just another performance, another calculated strike in the war Ethan had drafted me into. But when I saw him waiting at the foot of the stairs that night, immaculate in a black suit, his gaze sweeping over me with that unreadable intensity, my pulse betrayed me. Remember, he murmured as his arm slid around my waist, his hand warm and steady, everything we do tonight is for him to choke on. He didn't need to say Daniel's name. We both knew who him was. The auction began, the usual parade of luxury items and obscene wealth. Daniel arrived late, making sure every head turned, his smirk aimed directly at us when he saw me at Ethan's side. My stomach clenched, but Ethan's grip tightened just slightly, grounding me. Don't look at him, Ethan said softly, his lips barely moving. Look at me. I did. And that was when the first item came up, a rare painting Daniel had been boasting about for weeks, certain it would cement his image as a patron of the arts. The bidding started. Daniel lifted his paddle, confident, relaxed. Ethan lifted his immediately after. The crowd stirred. Numbers climbed, tension crackled. Daniel's jaw tightened, his smirk faltering as Ethan's bids rose without hesitation, without concern for the astronomical price. By the time the gavel fell, Ethan had claimed it with a sum so outrageous even the auctioneer seemed rattled. Daniel's face was a mask of fury. The crowd buzzed. And Ethan? He didn't even glance at the painting. He turned to me instead, his mouth curving in a razor-edged smile. Smile, he whispered, sliding his arm more firmly around my waist. You just became priceless. Cameras flashed, immortalizing the moment, Daniel scowling in the background, me on Ethan's arm, his possession flaunted for the entire room. I should have felt like a pawn. But the way his hand lingered, the way his gaze burned into mine, it felt like something else. Later, in the quiet of the car, I finally found my voice. That wasn't about the painting. Ethan's eyes flicked toward me, unreadable in the shadows. Of course not, he said evenly. It was about making him bleed. His tone was cool, detached, the strategist at work. But the way his thumb brushed against the back of my hand, absent, unthinking, betrayed him. My breath caught, my chest tightening with something I couldn't name. I looked away, heart racing, knowing Daniel had lost more than money tonight. And knowing, with terrifying clarity, that I was losing something too. Daniel didn't lick his wounds quietly. I should have expected it. The auction had humiliated him, stripped away that perfect smile he wore like armor. It didn't take long for him to push back, and of course, he went for the one piece of the board he thought was easiest to move. Me. It started with flowers, a bouquet delivered to my apartment with a note tucked inside. We both know he's using you. Meet me tonight, don't let him make a fool of you. I tore it in half. The second strike came when he cornered me outside a luncheon, his hand braced against the wall, his voice pitched low so only I could hear. How long do you think this lasts, Iris? Ethan doesn't care about you. He never has. You're just the easiest way to cut at me. His smile was venom, his gaze crawling over me in a way that made my skin crawl. And when he's finished with you, when he's tired of playing, you'll still come back. Because no one else knows you the way I do. I shoved him off, my voice sharp enough to crack. You never knew me at all. But the words rattled in my chest long after I escaped, his poison seeping into places I didn't want to admit existed. That night, when Ethan showed up at my door unannounced, I almost didn't let him in. He brushed past me anyway, tossing his jacket over the back of a chair, his eyes narrowing instantly. What happened? I froze, caught off guard. Nothing. His gaze flicked to the torn bouquet still sitting on the counter, petals scattered like evidence. He picked it up, his jaw clenching. Daniel, he said flatly. Of course. It doesn't matter, I snapped, trying to snatch the stems from his hand. It's over. His grip tightened around them, thorns biting into his palm, but he didn't flinch. His eyes lifted to mine, sharp and burning. If it doesn't matter, then why are you shaking? I hadn't realized I was. My breath hitched, my chest tightening as he stepped closer, the ruined flowers still dangling from his fist. This isn't part of the pact, I said weakly, desperate to regain ground. His lips curved in a humorless smile. No, he agreed, his voice low, dangerous. This isn't strategy. This is me telling you that if he so much as looks at you again, I'll break him. My pulse raced, heat crawling down my spine. I wanted to laugh, to accuse him of acting again, of feeding the spectacle. But the look in his eyes wasn't for cameras. It was raw, unguarded, frightening in its intensity. He dropped the ruined bouquet onto the counter, blood beading on his palm where the thorns had cut. Without thinking, I caught his hand, pressing my fingers to his. His skin was warm, his breath uneven. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just us, the closeness, the charge, the silent truth neither of us wanted to name. Then Ethan pulled his hand back, breaking the moment. We need to stay focused, he said, his mask snapping into place again. Daniel will keep pushing. He'll try to get between us. Don't let him. His words were clinical, but the way his gaze lingered on me as he spoke betrayed the lie. Later, when the city was quiet and Ethan was gone, I found myself replaying it all, the way his voice had roughened, the way his eyes had burned. Was it still the pact speaking, or was it him? And more terrifyingly, did I even care anymore? Daniel never accepted defeat gracefully. The auction, the gala, the way Ethan had turned me into a spectacle at his side, it all scraped at Daniel's ego like glass under skin. So his retaliation grew nastier, more calculated, aimed not at Ethan's business but at me. He knew exactly where to dig. The first strike came in whispers, rumors planted with precision. Colleagues of mine began to repeat sly comments they'd overheard, that Ethan had a history of cycling through women, that I was simply the latest prop in his war. I brushed them off, but the seed was planted, and Daniel knew it. The second strike was more direct. A charity brunch where Ethan was expected but delayed by business. Daniel arrived early, alone, circling the room like a predator. He found me near the terrace, drink in hand, trying to stay invisible. "You're still letting him use you," he murmured, his tone low and mocking, just loud enough for nearby ears. "Tell me, Iris, what happens when he gets bored? Do you crawl back again? Or do you end up humiliated twice?" I stiffened, but before I could push past him, he slipped his jacket from his shoulders and draped it around me with exaggerated care. "You're shaking," he announced smoothly, making sure the closest guests heard. Still the same fragile Iris I remember. My skin crawled. I shoved the jacket off and stalked away, but the damage was done. Cameras flashed. Whispers bloomed. I was photographed in Daniel's jacket, and he knew exactly what that image would do. Ethan arrived moments later, but I was already leaving, heat scalding my cheeks. Daniel's smirk burned into my mind. I spent the rest of the day in turmoil. The photo spread quickly, spun into headlines by society blogs and gossip accounts. Iris back in Daniel's arms? The war for her heart isn't over. It was a lie, but it was the kind of lie people wanted to believe. That evening, when Ethan appeared at my door, the tension was volcanic. He didn't knock softly, he pounded once, sharp, and when I opened the door, he strode past me, his phone in hand, the photograph glowing on the screen. "Explain this," he said, his voice a growl I'd never heard before. "It's not what it looks like." My voice cracked with anger and shame. He cornered me. He put it on me before I could stop him. Ethan turned, his eyes blazing, his chest rising and falling with restrained fury. His gaze swept over me once, down to the soft shirt I'd pulled on in a rush after leaving the brunch, Daniel's shirt. The one I'd been too rattled to throw out, too distracted to realize I was still wearing. His eyes froze, then darkened. "Is that his shirt?" The words came out low, dangerous, every syllable vibrating with tension. I froze, my breath catching. "Ethan," he stepped closer, the distance between us vanishing. His jaw clenched, his voice rough with fury. "Take it off before I rip it off you." His words hung between us like a blade, sharp, vibrating, seconds from drawing blood. "Take it off before I rip it off you." I should have recoiled, should have snapped back that he had no right, that this pact didn't give him control over me. But I couldn't move. My breath stalled in my throat as Ethan stepped closer, each stride radiating fury so controlled it was terrifying. His eyes, usually so calculating, were wild now, storm-gray and locked entirely on me. His hand caught the edge of the fabric, his knuckles grazing my collarbone. The touch was light, but my pulse went haywire, thundering loud enough that I wondered if he could hear it. "You let him touch you," Ethan growled, his voice ragged, his breath hot against my cheek. "You let him put this on you, like you're his." His jaw flexed, his grip tightening on the fabric until it stretched beneath his fingers. "Tell me, Iris. Did you want that? Did you want him?" The words scorched me, fury and longing tangled together. "No," I spat, my voice trembling with anger and something else I didn't want to name. "I didn't want him. I never wanted him." My chest heaved, the shirt clinging to my skin, the space between us buzzing with too much heat, too much truth. "Then why the hell are you wearing this?" His voice cracked, his control shattering. I grabbed his wrist, pushing it away even as my body betrayed me, leaning into the fire he radiated. "Because he cornered me," I snapped, my voice breaking. "Because he knows it'll drive you insane." And it worked. Silence crashed over us, heavy and dangerous. His eyes burned into mine, raw and unguarded, and I saw it. The truth he'd tried so hard to bury. This wasn't strategy. This wasn't about Daniel anymore. It was about me. About us. You think this is a game? Ethan's voice was rough, low, as if the words had been dragged from somewhere he didn't want to admit existed. My grip on his wrist tightened. No. But you're the one who turned it into one. His breath hitched, and then, without another word, his mouth crashed against mine. It wasn't careful. It wasn't soft. It was furious, consuming, like he'd been holding himself back for too long and finally snapped. My hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer even as I hated myself for needing it, for needing him. The kiss was war, teeth clashing, breath stolen, his hands gripping my waist so hard it almost hurt. But I didn't care. I wanted the bruises. I wanted proof. When we broke apart, gasping, his forehead pressed against mine, his voice was raw, almost broken. This stopped being fake a long time ago. My heart stuttered, my mind spinning, because I knew he was right. I had felt it in every touch, every whispered command, every time his mask slipped and I saw the man underneath. Say it, I whispered, my voice trembling. Say it's not just the pact. His eyes locked on mine, burning, his thumb brushing the line of my jaw with devastating tenderness. It's not the pact. It's you. It's always been you. The words tore through me, unraveling everything I'd tried to hold together. And for the first time, the revenge, the pact, the game, they all blurred into nothing compared to the way Ethan kissed me again, slower this time, deeper, like he was claiming what had always been his. The fallout came fast. The photograph of me in Daniel's jacket had set society ablaze, but it was nothing compared to what happened next. Ethan didn't let the scandal fester, he weaponized it. He invited the press, the investors, the vultures, and Daniel himself to a shareholders' gala under the guise of unveiling a new project. I knew better. This wasn't about business. This was the battlefield. Ethan and I arrived together, his arm looped securely around my waist, his expression unreadable but his body thrumming with energy I could feel in every step. Daniel was already there, his smirk brittle, his date clinging to his arm like a prop. The crowd buzzed, tension thick enough to choke on. Cameras flashed the moment we entered. Ethan didn't flinch. He led me straight to the stage, his grip firm, his eyes scanning the room like a predator in his element. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice steady, velvet over steel. Tonight was meant to be about numbers, about growth. But let's not pretend you're here for balance sheets. You're here for blood. Gasps rippled through the room. My heart pounded, but Ethan's voice didn't waver. He lifted his glass, every gaze magnetized to him. So let's give you a show. His eyes cut through the crowd and landed on Daniel. The smile he wore then was lethal. For months, my so-called rival has whispered about me, about us. He's told anyone who will listen that Iris is his, that I'm using her, that this is some game. A murmur swept the room, dozens of faces turning toward Daniel. His jaw clenched, color draining from his cheeks. Ethan's hand found mine, lifting it high enough for every camera to capture the diamond glinting under the chandeliers. Here's the truth, Ethan said, his voice low, deadly, and absolute. She was never his. She was never anyone's to claim. She stands beside me because she chooses to. And if you think otherwise, look at him. He tilted his head toward Daniel, his tone sharpening like a blade. The man who was abandoned by the only person who ever agreed to stand beside him. The man who can't keep a promise, a business, or a woman. That is the rival you've been listening to. Laughter and whispers cut through the ballroom like knives. Daniel surged forward, his hand trembling as he pointed at Ethan. This is a charade. You don't care about her, you never have. She's nothing to you but leverage. Ethan cut him off with a look that silenced the entire hall. His grip on my hand tightened, his voice a growl that rolled through the room. You're wrong. She's everything. Silence. Breathless, stunned silence. Then the cameras exploded. Flashes burst like lightning, reporters shouting questions, investors leaning in with wide eyes. Daniel stood frozen, his face ashen, his empire crumbling around him. Ethan turned to me, his gaze softening just slightly, just enough for me to see the truth in his words. He bent close, his lips brushing against my ear as the chaos raged around us. "It's done," he whispered. "He's finished." I stood there, my hand in his, my body trembling with the enormity of it. Ethan had destroyed Daniel not with money, not with force, but with the one thing Daniel could never recover, me. The gala ended in chaos, Daniel storming out with his pride in tatters, the press chasing him like wolves, investors circling like vultures. But Ethan didn't linger in the wreckage he'd created. He didn't need to. His victory was absolute. Instead, he led me out quietly, slipping past the crowd until we were alone in the back of the car, city lights streaking past the tinted windows. The silence between us was charged, not with anger this time, but with something far heavier. I turned to him, my pulse still hammering from what he'd said on that stage. "She's everything." The words echoed in my chest like a drum I couldn't quiet. "You didn't have to do that," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Say it like that. In front of everyone." Ethan's gaze stayed fixed on the passing city, his jaw tight. For a moment I thought he'd brush it off, chalk it up to strategy. But then his hand found mine, his thumb brushing over my knuckles in a way that was almost hesitant. "You think that was for them?" His voice was low, softer than I'd ever heard it. "I said it because it's true." My throat tightened. I didn't know how to answer, didn't know how to process the way my chest ached at his words. Ethan, his name was a plea and a warning all at once. He finally turned to me then, his eyes stripped bare, no armor, no mask. "I've admired you for years, Iris. Before Daniel. Before all of this. I saw the way you carried yourself even when he didn't deserve you, the way you lit up every room without even trying. I wanted you long before I had any right to." My breath caught, sharp and unsteady. "Why didn't you ever?" "Because you loved him," Ethan cut in, his voice breaking with a rough edge. "And I don't take what isn't mine. I thought I could live with that. Until he threw you away." He leaned closer, his forehead resting against mine, his hand cradling my jaw like I was something fragile, something priceless. "I won't pretend anymore. Not with you. Not when I've wanted this for so damn long." The world outside blurred into insignificance. All I could feel was his breath against my lips, the sincerity in his touch, the weight of his words settling deep into the cracks Daniel had left in me. For the first time I didn't feel like someone's backup plan. I felt like the only plan that had ever mattered. When his lips finally met mine again, it wasn't fury this time. It was reverence, slow and devastating, like he was promising me forever with every kiss.